Welcome, everybody. My name is Leah Straley. I'm the Dean of Recruitment. For those of you I have not met, I have met many of you, seen you on Skype and Zoom and over the phone, and we are really, really excited to have you in our fall class. This Zoom meeting is being recorded, so just take note of that. It will be made available for those who cannot attend, or if you would like to watch it again, you can feel free to do that. I want to just give a shout out to Jordan and Jessica in the admissions office. If you guys can raise your hand, you have had lots of interactions with our students. So we're just going to get started. I would like to hand the floor over to Dean Galini. We are very excited for his beginning of his journey at Willamette, and so I am going to open it up to him, and he's going to chat with you all for a little bit, and then feel free to ask some questions if you have any for him. Thanks a lot. All right, Dean Galini.
Yeah, thank you, Dean Straley. I'm just so excited to be with all of you today. I join you from actually right here in the law school. You'll see in the background, I'm officially moved in, and although my formal start date is not until July, it's really been my privilege to begin work these last couple months and navigate the transition and get ready for all of your arrival. I won't assume that you know my background, so I thought I might just start with sharing a little bit about where I'm from and why I'm excited about the transition. So I'm joining you after 10 plus years at the University of Arkansas, where I served on the administrative side in a variety of administrative leadership roles dating back to 2014. And then as a scholar and teacher, I focus on criminal law and procedure. And so in that space, the 1Ls for criminal law, the basic criminal procedure course, CrimPro 2, federal criminal law, and I will confess that I don't know, for those of you who've seen Making a Murderer, I got so fed up with everybody asking me, what do I think about whether Avery and Dassey are guilty, that I created a course called Unmaking a Murderer. And in the news, sort of happy coincidence with some of the social unrest we're seeing, at least for my curricular area, I teach a seminar on police discretion, training, and accountability. So that's a little bit of a movie trailer into kind of my scholarly background. But outside of that, those twin appointments, I also, for the last 10 plus years, have served as the head coach of two men's college hockey teams, beginning first in 2006 at the University of Pennsylvania, and then took over at the University of Arkansas for the men's team there in 2009. So it's with all of that background that I'm excited to join you. And I thought I might take a shot at talking a little bit about maybe what's on your mind about the fall to come. And certainly it's on my mind as I eat, drink, and sleep this new pandemic reality that we're all in. And then I thought I might share a little bit about how I might leverage all of the fun facts you submitted and share just a little bit about who you're in a room with. And I promise at the end of that to give you my own fun fact. So off we go. Let's talk fall. And as I do share a little bit about the fall, I'd love it if you just, as I'm talking, if something's not clear to you, please nudge me along in the chat or do raise a hand. I confess that I have been so in the weeds with these plans that I might skip a few analytical steps along the way. So I will try to start from the beginning. So our intent is to open residentially consistent with public health guidance. So what does that mean? The phrase that I'm trying to use with anyone who will listen is to create a plan that has nimble stability. And so I have to acknowledge at this point, this early point in the explanation, sort of like giant shrimp, right? The two things don't really work together. But here's the idea. We want to have a plan that offers you enough stability to know where we're headed, but then also be ready to pivot without compromising the quality of our educational delivery in case things beyond our control require that we change the way that we deliver. So let's sort of start with the assumption that our state and the Higher Ed Commission gives us increasing discretion to gather in person. What might that look like for all of you? So what we're doing is constructing a cohort plan where the idea would be for classes, for your incoming class, you would be split into, let's say, A, B, and C cohorts. So let's assume we had a class of 60. we would have students in the A cohort at about 20, with B and C taking classes synchronously by distance. And then when the A students are out of the building, the B students are in the building, and A and C are out, and so on, right? So that we're rotating around in a manner that allows you the flexibility to be residential, but also provides the infrastructure for the delivery of the remote. And I should emphasize here that I should emphasize that stability word here. So along the way, we've gotten a lot of appropriate questions around, well, what might attendance look like? What if I come in to caring for someone who's immunocompromised? What about childcare? And so I want to emphasize that word flexibility, which perhaps most relevant to what might be on your minds is I've asked the faculty to think about adopting a flexible attendance policy. So if, for example, you said to me, I'm really much more comfortable being wholly remote. And by the way, I'd love to get some feedback from all of you on where your comfort levels are right now. Then we'd have an attendance policy that is ready for that scenario. Just like if you told me, well, I'd really like to be in the classroom as much as possible, we could have that conversation as well. So again, it's about having the stability through that cohort plan to give you some sense of the community you'd be with, but then having that backstop of nimbleness so that we can adjust to each of your circumstances. So let me pause before I tell you a little bit about you and share my fun fact. And let me just take your questions, please, because I have to acknowledge there are a lot of tentacles to this octopus.
And for those of you who would like to turn your camera on, feel free to do that. I think automatically cameras were turned off, but we would love to see you if you are comfortable turning your camera on.
Yeah, so don't all talk at once. So here, while you're thinking about questions, we can double back to this. Let me tell you a little bit about who you're in the room with. So with this class, in no particular order, is comprised of musicians, a power lifter, bakers, a black belt in karate, a 10-year racer in the soapbox derby, international travelers, a filmmaker, a professional actor, professional musician, an opera singer, a poet. I just can't imagine, and I couldn't go much further without saying to you, I couldn't imagine a better class to be with as your first year dean. And so the opportunity to go on this journey really together, I think, is a special one for me, and I wanted you to hear that right up front. I'm not sure that my fun fact is as good as those and the many others that you submitted, but here's mine that you would never find in my background. So for the past roughly 2 decades, I've been an amateur boxer, and as my age started to betray my skills, I moved into, to the extent I ever had any to begin with, I moved into pro bono consulting for professional fighters. So I manage and monitor professional boxers who are in the super middleweight division and the heavyweight division. And it just struck me that this was a highly unregulated area where really talented athletes could use legal advice, and access to counsel was not sort of the first thing that was prioritized when they were asked to sign on the dotted line. So it's been a fun journey for me that's totally outside of anything else that might come up in our conversations. Oh, good. We are starting to ask some questions. That's great. So I'm going to read the question to you, and then I'll take a shot at answering it. For those who are commuting, will the cohort be consistent? Oh, yes. I'm thinking of not having a 4-hour gap between classes, for example. Right. So sure, a little bit more detail. The working idea right now is for your class, the 1L class, to have the building, so to speak, at designated times. So we are looking at Monday, Wednesday, and Friday that would just be for you, so that you would have predictability and stability in that schedule. We're also trying to put you in a consistent room with a consistent seat, with a consistent place for you to have your backpacks. And I should probably mention at this point that we have social distance measured, myself and Associate Dean Dobbins. The appropriate way to residentially seat, for those of you who might wonder, well, why would we need to limit the number of folks, is perhaps obvious, but just to make clear, in this current public health reality, we can't have everyone sitting next to one another. So when we go in and measure 6 feet apart from one another, we've tried to prioritize you having a consistent seat and a consistent classroom and a consistent space for your belongings. And so the idea would be the professors would trade in and out, but you wouldn't necessarily have to, at least in this fall semester space. Good, I'm glad we like the flexibility. So as of right now, what is the plan for the first month? So I'm at the risk of repeating myself. My goal would be for us to open right away residentially, for you to be placed in a cohort once we settle on formalizing the building access piece. And I should pause and acknowledge that the governor's guidance has not opened to a degree that institutions of higher ed have clarity around what exactly the Higher Ed Commission expects of us. We've seen the draft guidelines, and so we've tried to build a plan based on the drafts we've seen. But the idea would be to assign you a cohort to actually put you into your classes and then to offer the stability for that semester. And the only reason we would deviate from it is if we had to pivot as a result of the public health guidance, meaning we simply couldn't be together residentially in the classroom. I should pause and say, before I address a couple of other questions in the chat, and do please keep them coming, that although last semester we went from residential to remote, right, just binary, one to the other, we're trying to think about a middle ground step, so that if we had to go from cohort to second wave when we can't be together in groups, to think about giving you some building access, even if we couldn't have you in person for your classes. So thinking about this as sort of a step down in levels, right? So I would want for you to still have that community building opportunity in our beautiful physical plant as an intermediate step, if we can, before just automatically going remote. Next question. And if, by the way, they're starting to stack up in the chat, if for some reason I don't get to yours, just please re-ask, don't be shy. Are you providing a flexible schedule for international students that may not be able to attend in person until borders open? Absolutely. So one thing that you may be interested in, and maybe this is too in the weeds, so indulge me, but the ABA has provided law schools who apply for what's called an emergency variance, meaning we can offer you more credits by distance as part of your JD credits than the ABA standards would otherwise ordinarily allow. And so what we're in the middle of right now is applying for that emergency variance to provide the exact levels of flexibility that we're all talking about. We will finish the application within about 3-ish weeks, and hopefully we'll have a return on that, I'm told, 2 weeks later. So again, nimble stability. I want you to know where we're headed, and then you'll have to sort of sit tight on updates. And rest assured, as soon as I have them, I'll funnel them through Dean Straley and her team. What's some of the feedback from the law professors about how comfortable they are with moving in-person, remote, or hybrid classes? So it's a wonderful question. And just like I'm visiting with all of you talking about flexibility, my intent is to provide the same for them. So I'm certainly not going to tell a professor amid a pandemic that he or she must deliver coursework in a particular way. It's too early to speculate on which professors specifically would feel comfortable or uncomfortable. We're just in the middle of those conversations right now. It's perhaps relevant for you to know that we have isolated those conversations to such a degree that we've asked our 1L professors specifically to talk about this plan, to start getting out in front of any concerns that they might have about delivering material through the cohort plan that we've outlined today. And certainly we'll keep you updated on how those conversations go. But I have to give them credit, by the way, that they proactively, wholly apart from our what we've launched as a reopening task force, they wanted to create a subset of that task force to focus just on you and to focus on what 1L best practices should we adopt so that we're trying to be consistent in not just, by the way, the delivery of your first year education, but how can we build community, focus on your wellness, and to try to make sure that we are literally experiencing this together so that you don't feel as though we're sort of isolated in these pockets. Is there an option to be remote the first semester because of COVID-19? If we go back to normal, what precautions will the school take to ensure health safety? So I should say that there's nothing normal about the way I intend. I just have to own this, right? There's nothing normal about the way that I intend to deliver your fall education experience. And I want to be transparent with you that at present, I don't view normal as even on the table. So it's very difficult for me to imagine the traditional sort of 120 students in the class, split 60 and 60, and 60 students are in our large classrooms. So I just want to stake that ground out clearly that hey, if we get to that place, what a wonderful celebration we'll all have. But I'm just not seeing it, reading the tea leaves of public health guidance. And so on the back end of that question, what precautions are we taking? Whatever I can get my hands on is the answer to that. Whatever protocols that we can adopt, that we can put in place as a community to ensure and not just but our staff and our faculty safety. And so a little bit more maybe on the reopening task force. I've asked the faculty, wholly apart from your 1L cohort of professors, to think about what best practices should govern the delivery of an enhanced education in the remote space. But I've also asked Dean McAlpine to lead a team to explore what community norms should we adopt to ensure safety, just interacting in the community. And through that, what I'm hoping we do is drive a culture of shared ownership, meaning it's not just on one branch, one person, one office for us to be successful in this space. It truly is going to take our entire community. So as we think about precautions, I'm open to feedback. If there are things that through these conversations and the ones that we'll have throughout the semester that you want my attention on, please don't be shy. I care deeply about what you're worried about, and standing up a plan that folds in your concerns is really important to me. I know that's not a perfect answer, but rest assured that we have an 18-page reopening task force document that details across the 5 arms of our task force the precautions that we're considering. When will we know the set date for orientation? It's a wonderful question. Dean Straley and I and some others are getting together next week to talk about this very thing and whether we should launch orientation in the manner that we have in the past. We've had some really engaging conversations about perhaps some modifications to past delivery. I don't think I should speculate beyond that because we're just so early in those conversations, but I think it's fair to say that we will shoot to have both the cohort plan firmed up alongside orientation no later than the mid-July timeframe. That's at least when I've asked the reopening task force to deliver back their recommendations to me so that I would have enough time to deliver recommendations to our central administration. When does the law library reopen tentatively, and when would we as 1Ls have access? It's a wonderful question also, and thank you, by the way. I just pause and thank you for your thoughtful questions. The library is a separate arm of the task force, so there is actually a separate library piece of the task force that's working with our central library as well, the Hatfield Library on Central Campus, because we have some separate access issues to think through and separate social distance concerns to think through, simply because there's a lot of furniture in the library and perhaps hard to social distance if we're used to gathering in, for example, study carrels or 6 people around a table. So like others, and please don't shoot the messenger, it's still a bit early to speculate on what that looks like. But what I can say is the goal here early is to sync up when you're in the building with your classes residentially to filter that on the back end of your classes with access to the library. So that when you're in the library, it's your space. And then when you leave the library and it transitions to the upper level building access, it's their space. Now, whether we can build out some other access for you in the building that would likewise be available just for you, we're just in the very early stages of thinking about. So I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver there, but I've asked the task force to think about, given the size of our building, whether we can leverage that size to be creative about what other space we might be able to chop up and sort of segment out for our student community. Any information on what orientation might look like? Yes, sure. Will the elements of that event be remote? Would we come to campus in groups for part of orientation? Is Intro to Law School, the optional piece, still happening? Oops, my chat just disappeared. I just wanted to make sure I caught the totality of that. You guys, I need to talk faster apparently. There it is. Okay, good. So there's a couple of things on the table right now, and Dean Straley, I would encourage you to hop in if I miss anything in our conversations. But one of the things that we've talked a little bit about is, number one, continuing to prioritize meeting in person, but doing smaller chunks of orientation. So for example, a cohort of you would come in for residential orientation, for example, in the morning, and then a cohort would come in the afternoon, and we might deliver the same programming across both of those, but to limit the number of people in the building, but to make sure that we all have equal access to the information. And then perhaps shortening that planning, but then doing a reorientation later in the semester so that it takes some of the pressure off of delivering all of the information in one space, acknowledging that it's difficult, again, for all of us to be in the building at the same time. On the Intro to Law piece, yes, we would like to find a way to deliver some form of stand-up programming, including myself and some other law faculty, to talk a little bit about what you'll see and what you can expect to see in the first semester, and talking through how we can help you be successful in those first couple weeks. But I want to repeat that from my part, I want to help us find ways for that to be an ongoing conversation throughout the semester that might also bring in some of our academic support and bar pass faculty to talk to you about successful habits in law school. So I just wouldn't want you thinking that we're only going to have that conversation in the orientation space. We'd like to have it throughout the semester. Oh, and then the back end of that piece, the remote aspect. Yeah, certainly no reason to think that for those who might feel uncomfortable being in person for orientation, that we can't find ways to accommodate remote delivery as well. In fact, you might be interested to know that I personally demoed the tech that we're installing into our priority classrooms. So the idea would be, in real time, we could be talking like this, and this screen would be, well, I have you all on gallery, but we would have the speaker from a distance up on a drop down, the whiteboard over here, me talking to you residentially with folks in the audience, and capturing it in a recording that would automatically go into the cloud for your viewing later. So it's pretty smooth. And so we're thinking about ways to, again, nimble stability, thinking about ways to accommodate all of these various situations. Next, will there be social distancing guidelines? I don't even have to read the rest. Yes. For share spaces such as the library, definitely. Will there be only a set amount of students allowed inside? And if so, will that be based on a particular cohort? Yes. So let me take that first question first. We are partnering with our student body right now to think through. So I should back up and say, this idea of culture of shared ownership, I don't view it as my job to dictate what should these guidelines look like. Instead, I want to hear from our student body about what do they expect from one another in this community space. And so what the feedback that comes from those conversations will help stand up the guidelines that go with the public health guidelines, and we'll merge them together. And there's some complexities there, right? The library is shared space, there's gathering space, one level down, just outside some of our larger classrooms. Do we need to move the furniture? Or can we block some of that off and have our student body understand that we don't need to move it because we're going to respect as a community that we all have a part to play in making sure we're successful in this fall semester. So I really want that conversation to come from ground up rather than top down. But yes, there will be guidelines. We have at best draft only. They're pretty detailed, but they're probably not quite polished enough for public consumption just yet. Will there only be a set number of students inside? So yes, I should back up and clarify that this idea of cohort is rooted in how many students, faculty, staff, visitors, alums, undergrad students can we have in the building at any one time. So when we think about our hallways, our gathering space, our classrooms, our coffee shops, student lockers, etc., what's the max number of socially distant from all of those stakeholders, and then we backfill into building out the cohorts. So that number, when we assign the cohorts, is built on this baseline premise of how many people can be in the building at any given time. So yes is the answer to number of students inside, just like it's the same answer for number of faculty, staff, visitors. Has the ABA determined how many classes can be online? So this goes back to the idea of emergency variance, which I want to be clear, we don't have yet, although no law school in the country does. I have no reason to believe that we would be denied. We just simply haven't had the opportunity yet to submit our application. But the idea is that the ABA limits the number. Let's just start from the baseline. Let's pretend we're back at normal. You are allowed to take 1/3 of your credits towards your JD by distance. So if you were in a space as a student where for some reason you had to take more than 1/3 as a result of this coming academic year, plus anything in your 2 or 3L years, I view it as my job to make sure that what we do for you in the first year doesn't compromise the delivery of the JD. What the variance does is it says just for right now, we can exceed that 1/3 limit without any penalty to you earning your JD. So I would not imagine, however, that flexibility the ABA has afforded us will extend beyond the coming academic year, unless, you know, knock on wood, we're not in a similar posture. But I wouldn't imagine that would impact beyond this coming year. Will the grading curve be affected by splitting the cohort into 4 groups? So it's an interesting question, and it's a good one. I should clarify, when we get into the weeds of cohort, what we mean is you have well, let's take me. I'll have the privilege of having half of you for criminal law in the spring. So if we are still in this cohort space, I'm going to knock on my desk one more time, but let's assume we are, and I have 60 of you, the same grade curve would apply to those 60 because we are all in the same classroom experience. But what we wouldn't be saying is that you would be somehow merged with the other section of criminal law. So the grade curve that is in our faculty policy manual would apply to that class. And I hope I'm being clear, but there would be no merger through the cohort plan between the 2 classes. The cohorts would be within an individual. Again, my example of the criminal law class, you would be cohorts within my individual class and therefore subject to the same grade curve. Is there a chance the attorney mentor program will still be offered? Absolutely, that's a priority, and actually something we're going to be discussing as an administrative team this afternoon, not just how to stand that program up, but whether we can leverage our upper level students to help with a more robust mentorship program on a current student basis, so that, and I have to give your student body credit. This is their idea, and they deserve all the credit for thinking about how to welcome you and how to make this transition as smooth as possible. So please watch for more on that. But the idea would be to create a more robust mentorship program than less, despite the remote space. Really good question coming here. Certainly there are contingencies based on reacting to state, federal guidelines, but curious as to what someone falling ill would mean for a cohort or the school in general, should there not be a broad mandate, but a more local issue. Would one of us falling ill would be enough to force the school's hand in going fully online? Clunky question. No, not at all, but curious about that potential. So this goes to what I think of as the contact tracing question, and not the contact tracing for the state, right? But for us as members of the community. One of the core thinkings behind this cohort plan is limiting your social bubbles to the best of our ability. So let's talk about what that would mean. It has been explained to me that the contact tracing will happen at the university level. So if someone were to fall ill, I would get a call and we would move into isolating your cohort. So we would I would not, and nor would the balance of the law school, be responsible for the actual contact tracing. That's going to happen at the local level from Marion County's hired contact tracers. So you would not actually hear from me unless, you would not hear from me on the nuances of contact tracing. You would only hear from me on the high-level infrastructural changes to your classes. So now let's filter down to what that means for us practically. Let's assume someone in cohort A, right, if that person fell ill, then we would isolate entirely cohort A. Now we would have to wait until there was contact tracing that had filtered out beyond A into B and C, which goes to the author of the question, how far that impacts other cohorts and then the balance of the class. That's a question I can't answer because I wouldn't know who everyone has been in contact with. My only point for all of you is to see that hopefully the benefit of the cohort plan is to take this in locksteps. So by trying to limit the social bubbles, we isolate at incremental points rather than the entirety of the community. Could you speak about the transition online this last semester, feedback from students, feedback from faculty, finals, and overall success learning online for law students? Absolutely. Let me say this loud and clear though. In response to this question, I have asked our faculty to think carefully, and to their credit, they're standing up a summer-long teaching excellence series to explore what lessons we learned from the spring and how can we incorporate those lessons should we end up in a wholly remote space for the fall. So I want to be clear that we are engaged in those conversations throughout the summer, and I've also created some time in our fall schedule where we as a faculty can meet in an informal manner to just trade information about what's working and what isn't. So I also don't want you to see the summer conversations as it stops at the summer and we're off and running in the fall without any effort to improve as we all navigate this together. Now, in terms of feedback, yes, we have a lot of it. Areas where I think we can improve. I think we can be tighter on how to say this without boring you with it. The way that you sit in class and that gets recorded, we want it to be a smoother process for you to not have to do anything manually to get that recording into a space that's tangible in the cloud that you can return to at your convenience. We also want to be a little bit tighter about, for example, if you're remote, you're in the B cohort, and that's remote today, we want you to go to a specific link for that class and not have 15 different links to manage. And I think that's something that we learned out of the spring semester, is that students were navigating too many links with too many classes and insufficient sort of structural clarity on where to find the class if they wanted to review the material afterward. I'd say those are some of the things that have bubbled to the top. One other thing that might be worth pausing to emphasize is if we go remote, having our faculty understand that we want to, as a group, we want to prioritize synchronous remote delivery. So we did some experimentation with asynchronous. I won't assume you're familiar with those terms. Asynchronous meaning sort of like a podcast, you could sit and listen and then maybe have a flipped classroom where there might be some discussion or it's following along with a visual. From our standpoint as a faculty, we want to drive to the extent we can away from that and keep the level of engagement up through synchronous distance learning. Should we, again, I'm speaking in worst case scenario, should we all be in the remote space again with no other options? We want to try to keep it synchronous as much as possible. Those are probably the high level lessons we've learned, but by the way, I'm happy to drill into the weeds if there's interest. Coming back to let me make sure I didn't miss anything. Oh, sorry, finals. I did want to touch on that for a moment. And I think there's a question about calendar coming up. Well, let me take a shot at finals and you guys can ask if this isn't clear. So the university, oh, I see there is someone who's asked about Thanksgiving. The university recently gave us guidance that we need to finish up any residential delivery of instruction by Thanksgiving. So what that means for us is that after Thanksgiving, any makeup days for you by way of class would be held remotely, and any of your exam delivery would be, including your reading days, would likewise be remote delivery. So we would lean on learning from the lessons, and this too is going to be an ongoing conversation, but the lessons that we learned delivering exams in the remote space last spring, how can we improve that for the fall? I can share a little bit about, I think this was an area that, keep in mind, I at best got the helicopter view, so I'm probably not the best person to offer you detailed thoughts, but from that helicopter view, what I saw was a pretty strong system of, in short, providing a window for you to pick up your exam, and then within a specific, a narrower window within that larger window, the clock starts ticking, and you have to return it within the authority given by that professor to complete the exam within the larger window. My impression is that that worked quite well, and there are some nuances at the margins that I think we can improve on, but we are going to be using some version of that system again for your exam delivery in the fall. Coming back to the cohort idea, does this mean that certain students would be on campus at certain times, or would it be certain students on campus on certain days? So both, if I understand the question, but I think the spirit of the question is, just tell me how it impacts me. So let me take a shot at that. For your class specifically, my hope for you is that you would know when your on-campus days are, and just have this in your mind as I answer this: Monday, Wednesday, Friday for residential delivery. And so, and I'm not suggesting that we've locked that in, I just want to give you an example. So my goal for you would be to say, all right, on Monday, I know I'm on campus and I know I'm with this cohort of students, and I can plan my week so that Wednesday and Friday I'm by distance, but I have an understanding of what my building access policies are too, and the social distance norms that go with that. So think about it sort of in those two levels. In that spirit though, the hope is to limit your social bubble crossover, at least at the outset, with the upper level students, because we are replicating the cohort idea in spirit, although the nuances are different, in a different scheduling component of their specific day. So hopefully you can glean what a joy being a first year dean in the pandemic has been like as we navigate all of these logistics. But my hope for you is, you know, when you're in the building, when you're for class, when you're in the building without class, but you can be in the building and you know who you're in the building with. I would assume advising will be held via phone or Zoom. Yeah. When should we expect to schedule those appointments or get started registering for courses, or is more time needed to design remote courses? So in the 1L year, you essentially have no discretion over the classes that you take. So there's really no advising function in the sense of your discretion, and this is true for students across the country, your discretion in selecting classes will happen in the 2L and 3L year. That being said, what we are doing as a faculty is trying to adopt, whether it's common syllabus language, it's something short of a policy, some commonality in how we deliver office hours to you. And the thinking currently is to think about Zoom office hours to preserve that flexibility, but that's still a work in progress. But I don't want you to worry about anything to do with course registration. We're going to handle that for you.
I'm just going to chime in here and also add that for those of you who have asked us questions about when will we get this schedule, when will I be able to see what this schedule looks like, what my schedule is, which cohort I'm in, we had initially stated that schedules were expected to be released mid-June. Now it looks like the week of July 6th is when we will feel comfortable releasing schedules to everybody. So know that we are working on that, and you know, as you are gathering this information from Dean Galini, there's a lot that has to be considered here. But as soon as we have your schedules, you will be notified of those, and look for them around the week of July 6th.
Yeah, thank you, Dean. I appreciate that. With the expedited semester ending before Thanksgiving, how will it change the semester and teaching? Great question. For those of us out of state, would there be an exam option for that, or would we need to be in state after Thanksgiving? Okay, I'm going to take that one first because that's the easiest. Once we hit that end of residential delivery, the actual express intention of the university is that you will not return. So yes, you would plan to take your exams in the remote space and you would not need to be physically present for anything after we hit that Thanksgiving holiday. The first question is a little bit trickier with expedited semester ending Thanksgiving. So the ABA defines class hour as 50 minutes. So forgive me, there's no way to answer this without taking a little bit into the weeds of accreditation. We are a 60-minute class hour school. So what that means for us, without taking you too far down a rabbit hole, is we have some flexibility. So when the university said, hey, you need to condense into Thanksgiving, it actually impacts us a lot less than a lot of other law schools, because with that leveraging of 10 minutes for every single class period, we actually not only have some play with how we condense and compress, we also have some flexibility in, now I know you didn't ask, but I'm going to put it in your minds, how we have students enter the classroom and how we have you exit the classroom. So in other words, it gives us some flexibility to say 5-minute protocol for entry and exit without disrupting that core 50-minute that we have to give you. And it has this wonderful extra benefit of, practically speaking, not impacting the way that we deliver the education to you in the fall semester really at all. So in terms of the times you're in class, no change, thanks to how we define class hour. In terms of what that means, again, some flexibility around class protocols. Will exams be proctored online? Hard question. It's an academic freedom question, because one thing I don't do, and no dean would, is dictate how exams are chosen. So whether it's a take-home, whether it's a timed in-class, that's not for me to say. That would be an individual faculty to faculty member preference that you would see in your syllabus and your individual professors. I'll speak just for myself. We would do, if we are in the spring space together like this, yes, you would have a timed exam that would be proctored online. Have any of the programs, clinical law and externship program, been affected? Yes, exclamation point. So the externship program, it's been interesting. We have really strong experiential learning opportunities. This will be more relevant for you in the upper level coursework. And it's been wonderful that many of our placements have not at all disrupted our student experience, and they've been incredibly flexible with our students. So as I compared the numbers of summer extern placements for this summer compared to prior summers, we've seen at most a modest decrease. I think 3 was the last number I saw. Please don't quote me on that. But it just does give you a flavor of how little practically we've had our student opportunities impacted. Now, in terms of the ability to show up in an office, that's a non-starter. But in terms of giving students the experience that an externship would provide, we've still been able to stand those up. In terms of the clinic experience, yes, actually, I'm really excited about this, that historically, as I understand it, we haven't been as active in the clinical space over the summer, but starting in July, we're going to launch a summer clinic with a COVID focus that is prioritizing those in our community who have been uniquely disrupted or displaced by the pandemic, and trying to leverage our access to our access to justice mission to help support those who have been the most impacted, while using that as a student learning opportunity. The hope is, if that goes well, we would extend that into the totality of the academic year for our upper level students beginning in the fall semester as well. What else can we talk about that would be helpful, if anything?
Any other questions?
Dean
Anybody
Galini,
have any question about something other than what is the fall semester going to look like? I know that is on everyone's mind. It's on our mind all of the time. But anything else you'd like to learn about? Yeah, Jordan.
Dean Galini, do you have any recommendations for our students for what they should be doing over summer in preparation for their first term or semester?
It's a great question, and we are looking right now at some pre-orientation asynchronous programming that I'd love to offer you, just so you would have a productive space to prep up for that orientation weeks. Dean Straley and I will be sitting down this week to try to iron out which program we're going to adopt. And we're also going to talk about what sort of the timeline is for rolling that out. Not necessarily for Reliance, but I'd love to put that in front of you around the time we give you your schedule. So to be clear, our hope is to provide you with a asynchronous pre-orientation program to provide you with some constructive use of time to get you ready for the fall. Before then, relax. Do it on my behalf.
Could you speak a little bit about how the current state of the world? What is, as you see it, Willamette's position in the fight for equality and the fight for of ending racism?
It's a great question. I think about it on so many different lines. First of all, we need to be a thought leader, full stop. And so the question is, where can we do that? We can do it in the curricular space. We can do it in our cultural space. We can do it in the student body. And so to me, it's a culture question. What I worry about, what sort of keeps me up at night is how do I help deliver a legal education to all of you where you don't view the question of racial equality as we've talked about it and we move on. In other words, this is an ongoing conversation. You will be paid to think. You will be paid to solve problems. Problems don't get solved by one conversation, two. So it's about altering. Now I'm going to take us into the curriculum. It's about altering a little bit about how we think about the curriculum, looking for opportunities to fold the lessons of what we're seeing in social justice and social disruption into everything that we do in the classroom, which PS is not an excuse for thinking about more discrete curricular opportunities. Can we stand up a class that explores with more specific detail all the disruption that we're seeing? I will tell you, I'm resisting every temptation in my body to teach a seminar on policing and police accountability in the fall. And if you can find me a few more hours in the day, I would love to give that to our upper level students. So I hope that's helpful. It is just it's something I think so much about. Oh, I wanted to give you one other thought, which is we're also thinking Professor Gilden is collecting resources about the history of race-based decision-making in the state of Oregon. And he and I are talking right now about, well, how can we leverage those in broader community-wide conversations? How can we sort of pull some topics there that would be some great community discussion topics? So outside of the curriculum, outside of the formal class delivery space, how can we just sit around and talk about this in a productive manner and safe, non-judgmental manner that, I'll close as I open, will make us better lawyers, will make us better problem solvers and better thought leaders.
Anything else from anyone? All right, I would like to end at 4, so we probably have time for one other question.
There's one in the chat, if I could take a shot.
Sure.
Yeah, so what are some programs or other goals you wish to fill with Willamette Law's incoming dean beyond COVID? What a wonderful, thank you for that, because that is that's just a genuinely fun question. So I've been thinking a lot about, so I came here because I saw this wonderful union of tremendous strength in our student body, tremendous strength in our faculty and our staff, this deep alum connection. It doesn't hurt to be across from the Capitol. It doesn't hurt to come to school in a beautiful building, to be an hour from Portland, an hour from the beach. I learned that 3 weeks ago. All these things, right? How do we take them and put them into a longer term vision that works across various stakeholders? And to me, I've been thinking about this idea of the signature strengths of our school. And so for me, I see roughly 5 overarching signature strengths as I kind of create these buckets in my head. And this is really early real-time thinking, but I think we've got deep strengths in public service. And there's some focus areas that spin off of this, but I'm just going to talk at a really high level. We have strengths in social justice, 2. 3, we have an emerging strength, I think, in health law. And there's some wonderful, I left out the geographic leveraging of being right next to the largest private hospital, largest private health employer in the state. And then it's hard to run from our strengths in transactional law and business law specifically. And then I think the 5th one I've been thinking a lot about is strengths in just advocacy. So your skill set as an advocate. And so those 5 buckets are, when I look out at kind of post-pandemic, where should we all collectively be working toward driving? Those are probably the big 5 that I've been thinking about lately.
All right, I will ask the final question then. So Dean Galini, we have a class here who has all chosen Willamette for one reason or another. And you touched on a few of these things, but I am wondering why you chose Willamette. Why Willamette for you?
So for me, it touched all these bases I already mentioned, just incredible student body, faculty, staff, beautiful area. And I also, on the personal side, I have 2 6-year-old boys. Just to get out in front of what's in your head, are they twins? They're not. They're adopted a month apart. Although if we were passing in the grocery store, you better believe I'd say they're twins. And it just struck me that this is an institution that is in such a wonderful place, but with so much opportunity still to grow. And it's really difficult, I think, for other law schools, despite what they might say, to credibly say that. And I'm excited about the opportunity to build a culture of shared ownership where we genuinely work together as in a partnership to get this institution to that next level, finding out where your passions are, where they fit within those 5 buckets that we talked about, finding out where you want to practice or you don't want to practice, but you want to help in this particular area. All of those things excite me. And so I guess I would sum up by saying, there's an amazing foundation here, but I think together we can leverage that foundation into our next chapter.
Okay, well, I will say goodbye for now, and I want to thank everyone for attending this. It is great to see all of you. This has been a fantastic introduction to Dean Galini and what we can expect, I think, in the next several months and then in the next several years. So thank you very much for everyone's participation. If there are other questions that you have that, that didn't get answered or you thought about them after this, please feel free to email the admissions office at law-admissions@willamette.edu, and I am happy to answer some of these questions or pass them on to whomever may be best to answer them. So enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you, everybody, and we will see you very soon. Thanks.